Now, if we look at the genesis of this radical Islam um, propagation and stuff, um, yes, we've seen fundamentalism in the past, but the main essence or the main contributor to this new wave of radical Islam that we've seen um, is the US. I mean, the US, this whole thing really started when uh, the modern version really started when the US allowed the Saudis and the Pakistanis to create very very extreme uh, um, terrorist elements to fight in Afghanistan, and then these guys started forming their crazy stuff. Al Qaeda from there, the Taliban, all these crazy guys got inspiration and started doing all this stuff, and then they unleashed them on the world.
What? No, 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 no.
Yeah,
I don't
that
agree
is
with blaming
that
the
is
US for these things. The US
it.
only, what the intervention after 9/11, right? Yes, it was a poor one in the sort of result that it
No,
gave.
no,
But what it just did
before
was that
9/11. This was during the Soviet Mujahideen war. Mujahideen,
yes,
the
the
jihad
US
was
supported the
promoted by the
Taliban.
US, and then
No,
they
it wasn't
supported.
promoted by the
No, it
US.
was it was there was a
It
video.
was it was
There's a video of
it was a
civilians.
defense against the Soviet invasion.
No, it wasn't. It
That's what
was
they supported.
it was an holy war. There was a jihad that was called then. The US in partnership with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And those two nations, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia supported a very extreme version of Islam then, and also Pakistan, the military dictator there, Ziak al-Uk. Those two nations, they made sure that okay, there were fatwas that were released supporting jihad against the Soviet Union, and then the Americans, praised it and called it a holy war for their land, not even a military conflict. They called it a holy war. And many of these terrorist organizations, they gained their what? They saw the way with the US support, they were able to chase away the Soviets and take over a land, you know, impose Sharia and do all those things. You know, that was one of the reasons why they felt very, very, because if you look at it, after World War II, which um which country or which nation did you see that was taken over by all these jihadists, and then they were able to impose Sharia law on the nation? It was not There wasn't really any nation that I know of that something, but the fact that they were able to do it in Afghanistan, all these other terrorist organizations are formed. They were very, very much, if they can do it in Afghanistan, they can
But
do it anywhere also.
you're missing a context. You're missing a very important context. Now, before the Soviets came to Afghanistan, who was leading Afghanistan?
Who was
Okay.
leading Afghanistan? I would
Yeah.
say there was a communist leader that was there, and then the Soviets came in to depose him because he was no longer popular.
Afghanistan was already practicing a very strict form of Islam before the Soviets came. Now, when the Soviets came and displaced the prevailing government, which, by the way, was already practicing a very strict form of Islam, it was now left for the Mujahideen to fight back against the Soviets, right, to repel them. So, what the US simply did was arm them, support them, in order to. It was a Cold War anyway, so it was done in, and it was not exclusive to Afghanistan. They were also arming other rebel forces in other parts of the world, in South Korea, in Vietnam, in Cambodia. You understand? So all those things were happening all over the world. It wasn't exclusive to the Middle East anyway. Now they armed them, and then the Mujahideen were able to defeat the Soviets and push them back. And then they now were now able to go and entrench their strict radical form of Islam all over Afghanistan and even to the surrounding countries. Right. But then the whole point is this: They were not the only. Afghanistan was not the only country that US meddled in. US also meddled in plenty, so many countries in Latin America. They meddled in Guatemala. They meddled in Venezuela, in Panama during the Cold War. All those things happened. You understand? It was a general stuff between communism and the free liberal world, right? So if something happened common, like if there was a commonality between Afghanistan and all these other countries, and none of those countries reverted to terrorism, why is it then that it was from Afghanistan and many of the other Middle Eastern countries that these terrorist actions now sprung up? It's because of the fact that there was already a doctrine that was existing pre Cold War, which was Islamic fundamentalism. What the ammunition and the support that the US gave them was only to help, sort of like exponentially, um, bet forth that radicalism to the world. You understand? So because you were not the only countries that the US intervened in or supported, they were not the only movement. There were a lot of other guerrilla movements that US supported to overthrow government and all those other things. So the fact that it now resulted in this Islamic form of terrorism was because there was already an Islamic fundamentalist doctrine existing in those countries already, right? And then after 9/11, the US went in and destabilized the entire Middle East and all of that, which bet ISIS and many of all those other, terrorist forces. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the core of the issue is still Islamic fundamentalist doctrine. It's not really about US intervention, because US intervention happened in so many other regions of the world, and we have not seen, or we are not seeing, any other sort of mainstream terrorism apart from Islamic terrorism. You understand? So it's very specific to the religious doctrine. So I don't really think we can take away that religious doctrine factor
Yeah,
from there, to be
you
honest.
can. You can.
Yeah.
But I'll keep saying, and I'll say this. Yes, I still disagree that there was an Islamic um, fundamentalist government in Afghanistan before the Soviets invaded, but um, that must have been a long time ago. As I know, the Brits were there; it was a protectorate of the British. Then the Brits left, and then the Soviets, came in. But there was a communist leader that was there, and then the communist leader was trying too hard. Afghanistan was just like Iran, you know, he was pushing secularism, but he pushed it too far and sidelined the fundamentalists that were in the villages. Then that was when he started to rebel against the central government, and then the Soviets saw that you know this guy was losing control over the nation. Then they tried to they tried to depose him. You understand? To put in a much more sensible guy there. So um,
Well, okay, yeah. I mean, I don't really have an argument against. I'm not really anyway. I'm not really against. Like, I understand you saying, okay, American intervention to play the role in it, but I don't really think that's the causative.
it's not
That's the
the
primary causative factor.
it's not the intervention per se. It is the promotion. The Wahhabists in Saudi Arabia and then the hardliners in Pakistan, they gave these guys so much power that these guys were able to spread their message. And that
No,
message
no,
is
no, we
what
can't.
most of the terrorist organizations, that message was what they held on to. That message is what they held on to. And if you look at guys like Osama bin Laden, those Osama bin Laden, he fought in the Soviet after. That was the first major jihad
Yes,
that was called in modern times.
yes,
The
yes,
first, and then the US
yes.
funded, they funded the Saudis and the Pakistanis to amplify this dangerous message of jihad
No,
and
no.
stuff.
They funded them. They
They
funded
did,
them against the
they did.
Soviets, not for the
No,
message.
it's not
The
the
message was a
form in which no,
byproduct.
no.
The
Yes,
message was a byproduct of that. The
Senna,
main
Senna.
message was anti-Soviet domination.
Senna, you could have you could have said anti-Soviet domination, right? Without, putting a religious tone to it. The US called it Zbigniew Brzezinski, the Secretary of Defense, or was it the states? He called it a holy war. He called it a holy war, and then that was how he called it. There's a video of him saying it, and
So
this is
so
a holy
but
war.
my question to you is this. My question to you is this. You say that America
Yes,
was promoting the ideology of Wahhabism.
they
Fine.
they
What was
they
Osama
allowed
bin
the
Laden's? What
Saudis.
was
They allowed the
okay?
Saudis promote that, and the Pakistanis.
Fine, fine. Osama bin Laden was a child of a prominent royal, or
True,
let's say prominent wealthy figure who was close to the
true,
royal family in
true.
Afghanistan. True. Sorry,
No,
in
in
Saudi
Saudi.
Arabia.
Yes,
Yeah, in Saudi Arabia. Yeah,
yes.
good. Now, according to you, US was supplying him funds to promote Wahhabism. But
N-
then, what was Osama bin Laden's
No,
primary reason when he wrote
no,
his when he released his memorabilia basically about 9/11? What was his primary reason
no,
for carrying out 9/11?
no. It's not him they were supporting. It's Osama bin Laden
I'm not
was
saying they
just,
supporting. I'm saying they were supporting the promotion of Wahhabism, which was what
yes, by the Saudi government.
Osama bin Laden subscribed to,
Yes, by
right?
the Saudi government. By the Saudi,
Yes. So
the
now I'm
Saudis
saying
promoted
yes.
Wahhabism. You get,
Yes.
and
So
then the
now I'm saying
Pakistanis.
why was Osama bin Laden, what was his main reason for committing 9/11?
His main reason for committing 9/11 was because, you see, after the jihadists, after they were able to beat the Soviets away, there was this notion of, okay, this was an invading force, that invaded a Muslim land. Any invading force that invades a Muslim land, we should carry out jihad. Now, the US find itself,
Okay.
they found itself,
Okay.
which, let me finish. US found themselves in the same situation, right? Because in the end, the US started establishing bases in the Middle East, and Osama bin Laden, having gotten, the notion that any foreign force that invades a Muslim land, jihad must be conducted against them so that they can throw them away. He also wanted to conduct jihad to chase away the Americans because he saw that, okay, what the Soviets did, he likened it to what the Soviets did in Afghanistan. So that was his motivation. And his motivation for carrying
Now
out 9/11
now
and doing all this stuff was because of, the success that they had in chasing away the Soviets. You know, the message that was, it should
so
have been,
so but your the logic doesn't tally. So wait, you say America is funding Wahhabism, which Osama bin Laden supports. Now you said, now wait, you said we're not supporting them against the Soviets, but they're supporting them to promote the message of Wahhabism. So now, if the aim was to promote Wahhabism, why would Osama bin Laden
no,
then
no,
attack the
no,
United States
no.
to
The
push
aim,
them away from Saudi's
no,
influence?
the aim was not to promote um Wahhabism. Let me explain. Let me explain. Okay, so the goal of the Americans was to chase away the Soviets. Now there are ways in which you could have done it to chase away the Soviets. You could have just supported them militarily, but just to make sure that there was enough fervor in the people, that the people really have like so much motivation. They left it to the Saudis and to the Pakistanis, you know, to devise a means to make sure that people are riled up. And the Saudis and the Pakistanis, they devised a means, and then they called it a jihad. You understand? Now, if the US,
That's what we
no,
are
they
saying. You are
called it
still
a
saying the
jihad.
same thing.
No, see, the thing is, wait, it is not that the intervention to chase away the Soviets or something. It was a fact that the means by which they went through it, you know, it was a very
The
stupid
means
means.
was hijacked.
Now,
The means
they
was
did not.
hijacked
It was not hijacked.
by
They
the
did.
Mujahideens. It was not
Mm-mm,
the US. The US did not
mm-mm,
deliberately try
mm-mm.
to inflame Islamic
No,
fundamentalism. It
they
was
did.
just
They
like,
did.
okay,
They
these are the
did.
people that no,
No,
it
they
was
did.
just these are the
The
people that
plan.
are
The
radical
plan.
enough to
No,
fight the Soviets.
no. The plan was
Oh come
project.
on, man.
No, no, no. The plan was presented to them by the Saudis and the Pakistanis, and then they took it, and then the
Because the
talk.
Saudis were radical Islamic fundamentalists as at that time, and the same thing with Pakistan. They were Islamic
Yeah, but
fundamentalists.
but
So the
the
US had no other option but to liaise with
There's
them.
a lot to
no, the
there's a
thing is,
lot I
It's a
want to say, but you
byproduct. It
guys
is
okay,
not the main
continue.
thing. It
wait.
is a byproduct. It's not the main thing. Like,
The US, no, the US could have said, okay, these Saudis, if you promote, this jihad stuff too much, and then we do this stuff, it would have like repercussions and stuff, right? It would have repercussions, but they allowed, you know,
let me bring
the
in
Saudis
Ifeanyi,
and
and let
if
me
I,
bring
let's
Ifeanyi
let's
to
hear what
speak
if I
what he
has
wants
to
to
say.
say. When you're done. Yeah, when you're done. Okay, yeah, Ifeanyi, you can go ahead.
Okay. Um, I've listened to a lot of what you guys are saying. I don't know if you have the time, I think there's this 2018 documentary. Just go on YouTube, type PBC, PBC, Iran versus Saudi Arabia. Those are the two countries literally fighting for, like, to be the number one country in the Arab world. So I think there's a lot to this. There has always been radical Islam at the background, sort of, even from when something like the Muslim Brotherhood was established in 1928. So it's not like this is a new thing. You understand? But the thing is, as at maybe pre World War Two, that's after World War One and post World War Two, up until like the 60s, it was covered with like pan Arabism. You understand? Most of these countries wanted like more of like an independence, their own state, and all of that. So that sort of radicalism was relegated to the background. It's not like it was never there. I think it has always been there. It's just more of, it has always been sort of like a fundamental core of spreading the message like violently. It's
Yeah,
just that most times when there's already like a strong um a strong man or a strong presence, or or a strong cause, it can be relegated to the background. Just like, let's say the Ottoman Empire was in charge, it's already like a strong political entity. So
yeah,
under that kind of strong entity, it's not easy for you to become maybe sort of like a radical preacher or something like that. You can easily be quelled.
yeah,
The Ottoman Empire had some sort of like, will I say, there might have been some undertones of people with fundamentalism, but it was more a political it was more of a political empire. So, but these things have been
yeah,
there. Now, coming to that documentary I told you about, you can fault the US for probably installing someone like, let's say, the Shah in Iran and removing Mossadegh. But one of the ways that Ayatollah Khomeini came in was that he preached a lot of radicalism and Islamic fundamentalism. That was like a huge part of his message, and those were some of the, and he mixed it together with, he infused it with nationalism, and those were the
mm,
people that chased the Shah away, because he kept on talking about how the person has, like, how the Shah had made their land in discipline and women are not covering their hair and all of that. So
mm,
it was already a doctrine that he was pushing. Now, when he became, the supreme leader of Iran, he had like the legitimacy, the resources to empower some of these people. Now there was still a sort of Shia Sunni split. He started preaching against, because Saudi Arabia obviously they are friends with the US. They've been friends with the US for a long time. Now he
Mm.
started preaching against the Saudis and how he also wanted sort of like that kind of Islamic revolution too against the house of Saud in the Saudis.
Mm.
Now there were sort of these radical preachers in the um in the mosques in Saudi Arabia, but most of them were sort of also, as I said, they were quelled because of the power um of the leaders of the royals in Saudi Arabia, because they know that that sort of fundamentalist preaching ultimately will threaten their own power, because when you go to that route you start talking, it's always about cleansing and purity and going against the power or something like that. Now there was a mosque,
That's what
I
happened with
think
the
there was a
shot.
mosque,
Mm.
yes. So I think there was a mosque attack then in Saudi Arabia. I think that was probably like the first terrorist, like proper terrorist attack that literally happened. Either maybe in 1981 or 1980 or something like that. That so because of that, um, this was I think I've forgotten the person saying it, but he's the spokesman for the Saudi, I think the ambassador for Saudi Arabia or something. So he was talking about how because of that the the Saudis now gave sort of like a had because had gave sort of like a free hand to the preachers, because it's usually more or less there is this sort of balance of power between the royals and like the clerics. So but there were some
Yeah.
fundamentalist clerics there, and because of things like that they didn't want to make, because of that power that the Shah wielded at that time. I'm not the Shah, Ayatollah, I mean, wielded at that time. They didn't want to have an open confrontation with the clerics, because they could easily sell, Josh is out, they could easily sell that message as these people are aligning with America and Israel to sell out Islam. So they sort of gave like a free hand to these people, and then that's where you started seeing some preachers and some people in Saudi Arabia, both businessmen, both people in the royal family, sending money to different countries to propagate that Wahhabism message. So these sort of things in Nigeria had already started coming by like the late 70s, early 80s. Like if you go and check about like the Maitasene riots that happened like earlier in the 80s, I think it was later quelled by either Shagari or Buhari as at then. So these things have been sort of rearing its roots like slowly, but we failed to notice, probably because one, we didn't want to offend anybody politically. We didn't want to offend anybody politically, and number two, I think some politicians just felt like there was a game in it. So it's not like, and then the US funding the Mujahideen that now became the Taliban. As Senayo was saying, the US, it was just more like a war between communism and the West, basically. So the US did not mind supporting almost anybody as long as they were anti-communist. It's not like they had it in mind to create a fundamentalist society or a Sharia society, but they did not mind. They supported Noriega, that was a drug lord in Panama, just because he was anti-communist. They supported um
Mobutu.
dictators like Mobutu, like Samuel Doe, like Papadoc Duvalier in Haiti, because these people would just always give them this clue like, look, I'm running out of money, I'm being threatened, support me or
Mm.
I go to your adversaries next door. So there was just this now looking at it now it looks stupid, but that was the mindset back then. So
Yeah.
and the US knew that some of these guys are radicals in the mujahideen, and trust me, like even in the mujahideen, that's the Taliban, it was split. Some were just people fighting for their country. I think there was some I think there was one of the leaders, his name was Ali, because I read about this story, and I listened to it on a long form podcast. His name was Ali. He was more of a pro Afghanistan person that just wanted external, he didn't want any external influence. He was a
Mm.
Muslim, but he wasn't sort of like the one that wanted a theocratic state. He just wanted to fight for his country and let the people govern themselves. While there was also a faction of the Taliban that wanted an Islamic state. So like, but at that time they were fighting an external aggressor, so they didn't really mind. It's just like how maybe some militants now split later on. That's just how they were. So after they chased, I think, the Soviets away, or the Soviets left sort of, now the militant wing of sorry, now the radical wing of the Taliban, more or less, were the people that now took over. That Ali was killed, and even the way he was killed, like, it's still sort of mysterious in a way. I think he was shot. People say he
Mm.
was shot. So obviously the Saudis that sort of gave a free hand to the clerics and people that were pouring money into these places to propagate this Wahhabi Islam. The US were their allies. So they were more or less, as Josh was saying, that people that they left the whole thing to. The when it, because again, um there's this, I know I'm speaking a lot. Let me again now, for example, whenever US want to intervene on something, maybe in a continent or somewhere else, they first meet their ally in that place and ask like, okay, what and what do we do? What and what will, this is our own interest. What are your interests? What is it that will not, our interests will come together or align and won't clash against each other? And how do we tackle this thing from your perspective, since you're the one that understands these people more? So usually the US wants to intervene in all these neighboring African countries, francophone. They will consult France first. That's how it goes for the most part. They consult France first. A lot of times, if they want to have any intervention in some of these Arab countries, they defer to Saudi Arabia or Egypt, which became their allies now. So those are some of the people that they um that they defer to. Obviously, the US knew that Saudis were sponsoring terrorism. But as at that time, their interest was just to chase the Soviets away, and maybe they thought it was the people that they could handle. That was it. And then again, like after all of that, when the Taliban really started, arming themselves and going against the government, they actually chased the Taliban into the mountains and all of that. But a country that has always known chaos from day one, and their military and the government, which the US took back, I won't lie, was corrupt. So eventually it collapsed and the Taliban are back in power. So I just feel like US were involved, but they were not the primary reason. There have been fundamentalist groups coming on, and those people, they it's more of a long-term goal. It's not something that just sprung up. They've been planning these things since the Muslim Brotherhood. When it started sort of like a political sort of thing, but now they you see people that sponsor terrorist groups there, and that's because this has always been like a long-term plan for some of these people. It might come in 30 years, in 40 years. That's how the plan goes. So I've spoken enough. Let's just continue the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and it was good to get that third party and historical perspective at least. So, yeah, but Joshua, you heard from him. Do you have anything to add or, rebut?
Yes, to an extent, he's correct. To a large extent, he's correct. I just took time to Google, the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, and it was for 10 years. That was from 1979 to 1989. 1979 was when um, um, the Islamic revolution in Iran took place. So the fact that the Saudis felt that they had to promote their own also fundamentalists so that they could counter, the message that was coming from Iran. That part I truly agree. I agree with him. Um, and yeah, I think you talked about the old part, but to you, um, yes, the Muslim Brotherhood and the old thing and this stuff. But I still stand by my word by saying the Muslim Brotherhood, the Wahhabists that were there before, they had no no end goal or no example to look at and say, okay, see, with this our terrorism, we were able to achieve something until the Mujahideen in Afghanistan were able to chase away the Soviets and be like, yes, this is a Muslim terrorist radical movement that was able to chase away a government that they see as foreign. So therefore, this can be replicated in all other places, and we just chase something away and then we establish Sharia. So Afghanistan became the it became the ground for that. It became the 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 should I say the checkpoint or the event that marked that stuff. And it's just clear because when you look at the um, the boom of terrorism that that spawned after that period, I told you, like I said, like Osama bin Laden went to fight in Afghanistan and then came back and started Al Qaeda. Even the Caucasus War. Now, that's one thing that we may just lose sight of. The war in Chechnya and the war in Dagestan that the Russians had to fight. It was after this whole Afghanistan thing. because the Mujahideen that were coming back from Afghanistan, that were coming back to their different countries in the Caucasus, they were going to this. They felt like, oh yes, we've done it in Afghanistan, we can also replicate it here. So um, I still stand on the fact that it is the US, maybe indirectly, you know, but it is them. They are cleaning up the mess that they have already started. Now, we've seen in the past that when they try to clean up that mess, like when they go into Pakistan with their uh, drones and stuff, they create more chaos on the ground because they just target anything and they just kill any kind of person. I mean, it's on record. I'm not sure how correct it is, but like that a US drone war in Pakistan killed like 11,000 civilians. 11,000 civilians. So imagine that kind of stuff happening in Nigeria. And that would just be crazy. And a lot more people will turn to terrorism. And it will even amplify the message. These people they are illiterate, they are uneducated. Yeah, so imagine them now saying, oh yes, it's these Christian forces that are dropping bombs on you from the sky. So you should join. It should just accelerate it further. But like the method in which the Tinubu government has taken, you know, collaboration and cautioning, collaboration and cautioning. It's you can get the you can get. I mean, the US, they're the ones that were denying the sale of weapons to Nigeria because they said, okay, human rights violations during the Biden administration and during the Obama administration, right? But like now, yeah, we are partners with them. We can get those weapons. We can get those military aids that goes to Israel, yeah, to destroy, Gaza, and that goes to Egypt also. Can get some of that military aid and also use it. It's a non-state sponsor. It's a non-state entity sponsored genocide against Christians, not a state-sponsored
All
genocide
right.
against
So
Christians.
so but yeah, I mean, so yeah, but Joshua,
Yeah.
I think to an extent though, we sort of had like a common ground when you said even though it may not have been a direct um, plan for the US to have those stuff they spread out, but it was like an indirect cause. So yeah, I think I can agree on that middle ground. But my whole point was just that that was not the only place where US intervened. US intervened in several other places. The only reason why the terrorism there has been sustained this long is because there's a fundamentalist ideology
Yes.
that has been there latent all the while, and all it just took was
The
that
US to
trigger
the US to
because
promote
other
it.
parts of the world have healed beyond the colonialism of the past.
Mm. It took the promotion of it took the US promoting giving the Saudis free range to promote it so much for it to now become something because you know that is just the something. We must not absolve them of the blame for that. We must not absolve them of the blame. I won't absolve the
Okay,
US
if
of
you
the
say
blame for
so.
that. Nope.
All right, if you say so. Anyway,
So
so but then okay, let's pivot to um let's when we've talked about what happened with Kwara State and Nigeria, and we somehow found ourselves in the history of Islamic terrorism across the world, right? So, but hopefully, like the suggestion was made, or rather, the solution was raised in the sense that Nigeria should embrace partnership with the US and any other willing country, basically, that is experienced in dealing with these sort of insurgencies, and end it once and for all. So we may disagree on why. Me, I feel like maybe the Nigerian government either lacks the capacity or the willpower, and I feel it's a combination of the two. If I'm being honest, there are elements in our government that lack the willpower to actually end these Islamic insurgencies, and I even some may even be going as far as supporting it, right? And also there's the overall whole lack of capacity that Nigeria just generally has, you know, yeah, amongst other things. So So yeah, you may disagree with that and you may say, okay, it's just capacity wise and all of that. But anyway, the good thing is that at least the partnership is in progress. There are US troops on the ground now, and it's looking like it's only a matter of time before more and more join in and we get much more stronger partnerships. So anyway, the way it happened may not have liked it with the Trump's threats and all of those things, but I think fundamentally those were necessary to get us to where we are today. So I embrace the full scope and the whole journey of it all.